be doing an hour from now? Well, will you be listening carefully to another presentation, or maybe catching up on some work emails, or maybe skipping the conference altogether and secretly go to a bar and have a few beers with your friends? Right? Behind this simple question lies one of the most important decisions we make every day, which is, how do we invest our time? We only have 600,000 hours on average to live, so do we decide how to spend these hours in order to maximize our happiness, not only in the moment, but also in the long run? Well, you might be thinking, the way to maximize happiness is do happy stuff, right? So maybe the keys to happiness is to spend a lot of time with our loved ones, or it's to engage in our favorite hobbies, or it's to spend a lot of time watching our favorite TV shows on Netflix. Or maybe the keys to happiness is actually to spend time on activities that are not that pleasant in the moment, but might be important for the long run. So things like working hard, or waiting in line at the DMV to renew your driver's license, or maybe just clean your house so you make sure you live in a healthy environment. These are difficult decisions, and in fact, if you look at the research, we spend about 25% of the time experiencing some sort of conflict between doing something that feels happy in the moment and doing something that might feel happy in the future. So as a research scientist, one of the key questions that fascinates me is, how do people balance these trade-offs in their everyday life, and what can we learn from the very happy people in the way they invest their time every day? To test these ideas and start to explore these questions, we created an iPhone and Android app a few years ago with my collaborators that tracked what people were doing, who they were with, and how happy they felt. The way it worked was basically that you got random signals at different times throughout the day, and if you agreed to answer a few questions at these times, then we would ask you, what are you currently doing on a list of different activities? Who are you currently with on a list of different people? And how do you currently feel on a scale from 0 to 100? So people might tell us, I'm not feeling that great while I'm working, when I'm waiting for my subway on Monday morning. People might tell us that they were feeling great while they were hiking in nature. People told us how they felt when they were exercising, how they felt when they were spending time with their kids, or how they felt when they were spending time with their colleagues, their parents, their friends. And in total, we were very fortunate because we got a little bit of media attention with this project in French, which allowed us to recruit a large sample of participants, over 60,000 people, who every day told us what they were doing and how they were feeling. And these people were from all ages, all parts of France, and all professions. Altogether, we collected over 1 million moments of happiness. That is, moments where we know what people are doing, who they're with, what they're feeling, and so forth, what time of the day it is. And we were able to crunch the numbers, analyze this data, and find some interesting things. So first, as you might guess, not all activities are created equal. Right? If you look at happiness before doing an activity and after, you realize that some activities are associated with a happiness boost. These activities tend to make us feel better. Other activities are associated with a happiness cost. So things like going to nature, or practicing your favorite sports or hobby, or eating and drinking, socializing, even watching TV, all of these things tended to make people feel a bit better after the activity. In contrast, things like working, commuting, housework, waiting, or even napping, all of these activities tended to be associated with less happiness in the moment. The same thing was true for relationships. Some relationships are very good. Spending time with your best friend, your friends, your partner tend to boost your happiness. It's the same also for your kids and your parents, even though the boost is a bit less strong. But there are also relationships that are not that positive in the moment. Spending time with coworkers or engaging with strangers was in the moment a little bit less happy for most participants. Now, if you look at the happiest participants in the sample, that is people who consistently across 50 or 100 questionnaires told us that they were feeling pretty great. These participants tend to invest their time a bit differently than the less happy participants. And this will maybe come to no surprise, but the happiest participant tended to spend a lot of times doing things like their hobby, or seeing their partner, seeing their friends. They were eating and drinking more. They were spending more time doing sports and exercising. They were also spending more time volunteering, which is an interesting fact in itself. In contrast, these happy participants tend to spend less time alone than the regular folks. They also tended to watch less TV, go less on social media, spend less time doing housework and downtime like napping and waiting. So, of course, these are correlational data, so it doesn't mean that if you are going a lot on Facebook, you automatically get less happy. But there's quite a bit of research from other labs that suggests that indeed there's a causal link between some of these activities and happiness. So if you get people to exercise more, if you get to socialize more, if you get them to volunteer more or to hold off on social media and go a bit less on Twitter and Facebook, it turns out that these things tend to be related to happiness. And doing these things tend to make us a little bit happier causally. Now, what's interesting here is that some of these items on the list were not that positive in the moment. So if you look at things like working or watching TV, working in our list of activities was associated with a happiness decrease, yet on average, the happiest participants spend more time working than the less happy participants. Same thing with TV. TV is a positive activity in the moment, but the happiest participants spend less time doing and watching TV than the least happy participants. So that leads me to one of the most interesting findings, I think, in our data set, and which is what distinguished happy people from less happy people was not only the time they spent doing pleasant and unpleasant stuff, but also when they did these pleasant and unpleasant activities. And what's kind of cool with our data is that we didn't ask participants happiness once, we actually ask it several times a day, and sometimes for weeks or even months. So we might know that a participant had a very bad commute in the morning, but had a great lunch and a great moment with a friend at work. Then they might have a very boring meeting, a nice snack, a horrible commute again, but this time they engaged conversation with a stranger. Finally, they got home and they saw their partner and then did the dishes. So we know what they did throughout the day. And of course, our choices of activities every day are constrained by the time of the day of the week, or life circumstances. But if you control for all of that, you start to see interesting patterns. And what we observe in particular was then if you look at the happiest people, they tend, when they feel down, when they're in a bad mood, to subsequently engage in an activity that makes them feel better. So if a happy person's mood goes down, typically in the next couple of hours, the odds that they do something pleasant increase. Maybe they take a longer lunch, or maybe they call their friends and spend time with their loved ones. In contrast, when the happiest participants were feeling great, they then tended to engage more in unpleasant activities that might pay off in the future. So they might spend more time working on an extra project, or they might start doing the dishes, or they might start engaging in conversation with a stranger who might end up being a good friend a few years down the line. If you look at the less happy participant in our sample, that was kind of the opposite. So you don't find that pattern, and if anything, you find that the less happy participants tend to do mood congruent activities. So when they feel down, they tend to keep doing something that makes them even worse. They wake up in a very bad mood and then they start cleaning their house, and that doesn't help. Or when they feel good, they tend to pursue activities that makes them feel even better. So they might wake up in a great mood and they might start seeing friends and doing all fun activities, maybe putting off important work that might backfire in the future. So to give you a concrete example of that, if you take an average participant in our sample, an average happy participant, and you're trying to figure out what they're likely to do on a Sunday afternoon, if that person woke up in a bad mood in the morning, the odds that they do something pleasant, like going for brunch and eating and drinking with a friend, are about 17%. The odds that they stay home and do some extra work or some extra cleaning are about 12%. So they're more likely to go for brunch to repair their mood than to do the extra work. If they wake up very happy that day, it's kind of the opposite. So now they're about 11% likely to go for brunch and about 20% more likely to go and to stay at home and do some extra work. In other words, their preferences flip. The least happy participant in our sample did not show that pattern. So for example, if they woke up in a bad mood that day, they were still more likely to stay at home and do some extra work than going for the brunch with a friend. And if they were ecstatic that morning, they would be more likely to go for brunch with a friend, maintaining their positive mood and potentially putting off the important works that needs to get done. So is this something specific to the French happy people? Right? Is there something specific about the way French people invest their time? Turns out that not really. We recently replicated our findings in a sample of Japanese participants and a sample of American participants. And whether you're Japanese or American, it turns out that even though the things that every day make us happy might be different across cultures, that pattern whereby happy folks tends to boost their mood when they feel down and tend to invest some of their current happiness in order to get things done when they feel great was constant across cultures. So what can we learn from our data and the happy Japanese, French, and American participants, and how can we apply that to our everyday life? Well, I think these are observational data, of course, but there's at least two interesting ideas from our finding. The first one is that it's important to schedule happy moments in your daily life, right? To make room in your calendar for fun, pleasant social activities that will boost your happiness. Now, this might sound very obvious, but yet the research suggests that the first thing that we do when we feel pressure for time or when we're lagging behind work is to put aside these fun moments, these fun activities, to focus on what the things that we need to get done. What our research suggests is actually one of the best ways to be productive might be to first increase our happiness and get that energy in order to get the work or get the chores done. So this is the first advice. Schedule happy moments, put them down in your calendar. The second idea from this data that I think is interesting is that if you have to do a huge pile of dishes lying in your kitchen sink, or if you have to go to the tax office and wait for hours to do some horrible administrative task, and if you're wondering when is the best moment to do it, our research suggests that the best moment to do it might be when you feel actually very happy. That one interesting strategy would be to trade some of your current happiness for the perspective of maybe some well-being in the future. And the worst time to do these type of activities might be when you're feeling currently down. So with that in mind, let me give you a little bit of a homework for our next coffee or lunch break. Okay? Before you try to decide how you're going to spend your lunch break, ask yourself, how do I feel right now? If you don't feel that great, maybe it's time to call a friend and get that happiness boost that will allow you to get through the day. If you're feeling awesome, why don't you try to spend some of this happiness engaging a conversation with a stranger next to you who knows, 5 or 10 years down the line might end up being one of your best friends or your life partner. Thank you very much.